Okay, well, let's turn around and say, okay, but who opposes them? Well, the opposition to the nihilistic left today has coalesced around conservative intellectuals who believe that the problem with the nihilistic left is that they're too individualistic. The problem with the nihilistic left is they believe in the individual. They believe in secular values. They believe individuals should choose their own values rather than accepting the values dictated to them by the community, by tradition, by God, by an authority. We now have a left that is opposed by a right that agrees with the left that we must regulate and control our economy, that agrees with the left that there are more important things than wealth creation, that agrees with the left that the meek, or in the way in modern terms we define this, the middle class, the working middle class, the working people, sounds a little Marxist, they are the standard of all well-being. They are the standard of all good. And if you want a reference to this, just look up my show on conservative nationalism. But I've been reading even more about the conservative nationalism, and it's just horrifying. Just horrifying. What they stand for, what they said, and what they talked about. Right? Hey. So you've got a right wing that is dedicated to collectivism, that is dedicated to authoritarianism, that is rededicated itself to religion, and that is dedicated itself to the denial and rejection and the uprooting of any signs of individualism in the culture. Indeed, all our problems, the conservative nationalists will tell you, all our problems are a consequence of too much individualism, too much individual sovereignty. They talk about it. Founding fathers, who cares? But there is too much individual sovereignty in America today. And as a consequence, what you get is kind of the nihilism of the left, because they associate individualism with nihilism. And the only alternative to that is a return to tradition, a return to religion, and a return to a government that dictates much of our lives, that dictates our morals, that tells us what we can watch, what we can watch, what we can say, what we can't say. Oh, wasn't that the left? No, it's the left and the right. We've got Tucker Carlson, a hero now of the right, who I guess at this conference, this conservative nationalist conference, was urged to run for president in 2024 after Donald Trump's 2 terms. And he had kind of a coy disavowal. Now the thing about Tucker Carlson is he's much smarter than Trump. He's much more disciplined than Trump. He could well be a new leader of an authoritarian movement to take over America. He would fit the bill. He would be perfect. Good looking, charismatic, unyielding, well spoken, and has all the right views. All the right views to lead a right-wing authoritarian party. By the way, you know what talk he gave? You know the name of the talk that he gave at this conference? The name of the talk was Big Business Hates Your Family. Now, there's a talk that a capitalist would give. Big business hates your family. Right? That's by the way, that's the talk the new right provides. That's the intellectual content they want to provide you with. It's a new right that rails against cosmopolitan elites. You know what cosmopolitan elites always used to be a reference to? Now, granted, this conference where they talked about this was put on by a couple of Jews, committed Jews, real Jews, right? But you know what cosmopolitan elite refers to? It always is referred in history to Jews. Globalism, generally, is a term that often is referred to Jews. So you're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, both on the left, with its hatred of Israel and belief that Jews in Israel control everything, and Jews in America control everything and run it for the sake of Israel, run America for the sake of Israel. And on the right now, we see this rise of the cosmopolitan elites, the Jews who manipulate everything for the sake of what? For the sake of globalism, for the sake of internationalism, for the sake of pure material wealth creation at the expense of real, decent, family-oriented, middle-class, proletarian, traditional Christian values, which is what the new right is arguing for. By the way, talk about anti-Semitism. Stefan Molyneux came up the other day in one of our conversations. And, in the context of Jeffrey Epstein, guess what Stefan Molyneux tweets? Right? Guess what? Because I said something about Stefan Molyneux being an anti-Semite. And I actually identified Stefan Molyneux as an anti-Semite before I identified him as bad in a lot of other things. Because if you listen to his talk from years ago about Israel, it is obvious that he is anti-Semitic. But here's his tweet about Jeffrey Epstein, just in case you thought maybe I was making stuff up. Now, some of you won't consider this anti-Semitic because you consider racism only when I say race X is bad, race X is good. That is the only thing that qualifies in your mind for anti-Semitism, or for racism. But that's insane. That is not a definition. That is insanity. This is what he writes. Right. This is what he writes. I wonder, did Jeffrey Epstein abuse any Jewish girls? This is what Stefan Molyneux writes. And then he writes, that's one tweet, then he writes, kind of responding to his own tweet. It would seem not. Whoops, this keeps going away. If Epstein only targeted 100 plus Gentile children, aren't those all hate crimes? That's the alt-right for you. Richard Spencer, not to be outdone when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and anti-Semitism. Richard Spencer writes, the source of this analysis is a bit dubious. That said, he's writing about some article. That said, Acosta has stated he was told Epstein was in intelligence. Which countries? We can only guess, with the obvious implication he was working for the Israelis. Put simply, there is reason to believe Epstein was an Israeli operative engaged in much more than providing massages. Well, of course. If there's a sex abuse, pedophilia ring, then of course it all has to do with those Jews trying to control the world. It's those elders of Zion, all manipulated by Israel. Now, granted, these people on the fringe. Well, but Molyneux's not on the fringe. He has, 1 million followers or something like that. I mean, he's huge. Many of you listen to him, admire him, respect him. And Richard Spencer is becoming less and less fringe every day. The reason the alt-right is relatively quiet, it's because the rest of the Republican and the rest of the conservative movement is moving in their direction. Fast, galloping in their direction. Why would they have to move? They don't need to move anyway. And again, if you want concretization, quotes, then go to First Things, go to the magazine First Things, which is a Catholic journal of the conservative movement, and go read up about this conservative nationalism conference that was held a week and a half ago in Washington, D.C., and listen to the show I did on the conservative nationalism movement. I give you quotes, citations. So, the right has become completely and utterly nutty. Collectivist, in some respect, one could say nihilistic. Anti-American, if one understands what America is. pro-authoritarian, just like the left. Pro-authoritarian, just like the left. Very religious, much more so than I think they have been in decades. And their religion is coming primarily, the religious leadership is coming primarily from the Catholics. Anti-capitalist. I mean, one of the things that they were talking about at the Conservative Nationalist Conference, again, mainstream conservatives were there talking about this, was the need for industrial policy, was the need for exactly what I read from Elizabeth Warren's statement yesterday. The difference between Elizabeth Warren, as I said yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and conservative nationalism is minuscule. They want exactly the same thing. That's why Tucker Carlson read favorably from her economic patriotism plan that she put out. And he would support every element within that plan. Tucker Carlson, the new symbol, the new presidential candidate of the conservative nationalists. So that's the choice we face today. And look, there is no right of center good Republicans anymore. Trump has thrown them out of the Republican Party. They have left the Republican Party. There's still some on the fringes. But generally, they are gone. The what you would call is pro-individualism, some semblance of capitalism. Those Republicans do no longer exist. I mean, some of them at the National Review, and they're being marginalized by other Republicans. Some of them are commentary magazines. These are the neocons, and they've been completely marginalized. Indeed, their Weekly Standard, which was their publication, had to fold up, had to go away. You've got George Will, you've got Max Boot, people who I was never very respectful, never had a huge amount of respect for. Now I have more respect for them. But they're still minor voices. The dominant voices in the Republican Party are becoming more and more and more authoritarian, less and less pro-freedom, less and less pro-capitalism, less and less pro-individualism. They are negating individualism. So we stand today in a situation where there are no, and I emphasize this, no defenders of the Founding Fathers. No defenders of individualism, partially because they can't. The right cannot defend individualism because of their religion. The left, of course, cannot defend individualism because they abandoned it decades and decades ago. So finally, what Ayn Rand has told us would happen to the right has happened. They have completely imploded. They are gone. They have disappeared. We now have two collectivistic, nationalistic, authoritarian inclined, industrial policy inclined, anti-capitalist, anti-individualist intellectual movements on the right and on the left. And there is almost nothing in between. It's empty. It's gone. It's been hollowed out.
I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute. That man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it. And that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely, a morality not based on faith.
On faith.
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason, man's reason is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. It is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.
My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
Tell me the value of selfishness.
Use another word, self-esteem. The value of selfishness is that you esteem yourself as a value, that you live according to your nature, which means by the judgment of your own mind, and you respect your own mind, you respect your own ability to do the right thing, therefore you respect the possibility of being a morally virtuous person, and you regard yourself as a value worth preserving. To make a success of yourself in any line of rational activity is a great virtue. And people will attack you for exercising your ability, for hard work, for consistency, for ambition. And they will want to make you feel guilty of it. That is the greatest evil, according to my philosophy.
And wait, say that again. The greatest evil, according to your philosophy, is to attack an individual because of virtue.
What I call it is to experience or act on hatred of the good for being the good. That is attacking people for their virtues, for their achievements, for anything they have which is a value, actually, not for their flaws and not for their evil. In fact, people who preach that are the ones who are mawkish about the evil people, the failures, the liars, the cheats. Everybody who is weak suddenly acquires some kind of value. But anyone who is a success has to be attacked for his success.
And look at how you have been attacked.
Oh, I know.
How you have been criticized. There are many people in this country, forgive me, in this world who think you're daft.
They don't. They want you to think that.